Hey, what's up guys? It's your probably not your favorite YouTuber here. Time to get the disclaimers off first. I'm not meaning to offend anyone. I honestly find the Bible and the concept of Christianity and religion in general to be very fascinating. And in fact, I'm deeply considering to the point that I've pretty much decided that I'm going to start investing in religious studies seriously due to how vast and complicated and just fascinating I find the topic. I'm an atheist, as you probably got from the title, and I just find it so interesting that the book of the Bible has managed to expand across the world so much. This is a version that I got just recently, just while at the bookstore. Two versions that I already had in my basement are rather old. This one's falling apart. I used to use this one a lot, but as you can see I had to start using Scotch tape on it. Look at how small the print is. And then this is the one that I use now. It says larger print, but still, like, look at how small it is. Look at how freaking big the book is. Not to mention, this is just the Protestant Bible. There's also other versions of the Bible that have even more books and chapters in it. Not like that they're like twice as long. I think they're all roughly this long, but they have like extra stuff like bonus features or extended editions almost like. I'm just trying to be honest. I'm hoping to go through the stories of the Bible, mainly using the children's Bible that I thought I would have to buy before I found out that my mom already had one. It's heavy, dude. I think it's like even heavier. Yeah, it's heavier than the Bibles. Just barely. Almost the same weight. I think a fun little thing to do in this video that I hope becomes a series is go through the stories of the Bible by first reading them in the children's Bible and then going into the actual Bible and seeing what it actually says. I'm going to be giving my honest opinions on it, and if you disagree, then that's fine. And I honestly invite anyone, whether that's Christian, atheist, questioning, or another religion, to leave your honest thoughts in as well, and hopefully we can engage in civil discussion. I used to spend so many years just debating against people in comments, and eventually I just learned nothing gets accomplished this way. Especially when talking about religion, because it's so innated into the person's psychology. It's part of who they are. If someone were to question their religious beliefs, they would literally be questioning who they are as a person and their entire understanding of the world. The first story of the Bible, the first book of the Bible, is called Genesis, and the first story of the Bible would be Genesis chapter 1, or as Christians tend to call it, just Genesis 1. Personally, when someone asks me directly, what are some examples of some of the problems you have with the Bible, I jump straight into Adam and Eve, which isn't until Genesis 3, fall. The original sin is in Genesis 3. And that's because that I mainly question God from a moral standpoint rather than a scientific standpoint, because honestly, I don't really care if it makes scientific sense for God to exist. I know that's what a lot of atheists, YouTubers, and atheists in general do. They say, like, it doesn't make sense for God to exist. If it made sense, then I would believe it or accept that there's a possibility. Personally, I don't care, though, because gravity doesn't make any sense to me either. I don't understand why something having matter, something existing, essentially, automatically means that it has a gravitational pull no matter how weak it is. And I kept on asking people, like, do you know why that is? Do you know why something just existing means that it has a gravitational pull? And it seems like no one actually knows why that's the case. It's just how the universe works. So, you know, you could explain God's actions away by just magic. And when I hear magic, I just kind of hear, that's just how it is. That's just how the physics of the universe that we're in, that could supposedly just be one of an infinite multiverse, that's just how it functions. Which is why I don't really like talking about the creation of the universe story, which is barely a story really, as it is just kind of just, not even a fairy tale, like it's not like a story, it's just like a possibility of how God created the world back 2,000 years ago when people didn't really understand how it supposedly actually happened. But nevertheless, might as well start in the beginning. World's best-selling book, yeah, it is. Introduction of other children's Bibles tend to have, like, up here what chapters it is, but here it is not there. Instead it's here in the introductions of each section. Like, this doesn't help. Oh yeah, and something that many people ask me is, why are you so obsessed with covering the Bible? Why don't you go into the Quran or the Gita, which are holy books of Islam and Hinduism or other religions? Well, it's quite simple. The reason why I do this at all is just because it interests me, and the reason why I'm focusing on the Bible is because, well, one, Christianity is the dominant religion of my country and most of the world. Like, pretty much any country that is dominated by a religion that isn't Christianity exists, like, in the center of the world map, like Northern Africa and Southern Asia. There you can find a whole bunch of religions. Like, some countries are dominated by Islam, some by Hinduism, some by Buddhism, some by indigenous religions, some by atheism, and some, by some I mean one, Israel, dominated by Judaism. And then there's also other religions, like Sikhism is a very popular religion. It just isn't dominating any actual country, but it is very popular. But also, I'm just starting, guys. I have a whole bunch of people telling me, like, oh, you don't know this because you haven't read the New Testament. Well, I don't want to read the New Testament yet. I want to start at the start. People say, oh, you started the New Testament, then the Old Testament will make more sense. If this Bible is supposed to be a perfect, holy book written by God himself as the only message for me to understand his existence, then surely starting at the beginning is a good idea. God wouldn't make it so that you have to start in the middle for you to understand him. And just like these people who tell me, like, oh, you don't know this because you haven't read this. Yeah, duh, I'm starting at the beginning. People expect me to know all about the Bible even though I just started. People expect me to be covering all religions when, like, I'm autistic too. So, like, it's hard for me to have my mind focusing on a lot of different topics. When I'm interested in something, I'm interested in it intensely. And yes, I do hope one day, probably soon, to move on to other religions like Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and Sikhism and Judaism and all the other faiths. Well, all the other faiths. There's 4,000 faiths, more than that. More than like 6,000 languages, more than 4,000 faiths. All the religions are trying to get to everybody, and it's like, oh my god, can I please just calm down and focus on the creation story for this video. So now that I hope that I've made myself clear as to why I'm doing this and what I'm hoping to do and all the things or whatever, let's begin. The creation. In the beginning, nothing existed except God's Spirit, hovering over darkness and never-ending water. And on the first sentence, we hit our first problem. First off, Christians especially... Christians especially will brag all the time, and yes, it is bragging, that their God is omnipotent, meaning he can do anything. Omniscient, meaning he knows everything. Omnibenevolent, meaning that he is completely good all the time. Omnipresent, meaning he exists everywhere and yet still somehow exists beyond space and time and the concept of reality itself. What I find so interesting is that when someone says that and they say that the person or being that they worship is just infinitely everything, you're kind of burying yourself into a hole. Before we even cover that first sentence, the concept of a being that can do anything doesn't make sense. But let me explain. If a being could do anything, we could ask it to draw a circle that is shaped like a square. That doesn't make any sense. But if it can do anything, it should be able to do that. We could get it to point us to a married bachelor or married bachelorette, you know, contradictory stuff like that. And even if we do find that it can do all those things and defy logic itself because it supposedly created logic and exists beyond the concept of logic, then what about getting it to truthfully say the phrase, I am not omnipotent? But anyway, this Christian God has supposedly existed forever. You know, atheists will say the universe was created by the Big Bang. Christians will say, what caused the Big Bang? It must be a God. And then atheists will say, well, then what created your God? And then Christians will say, no one created God, because God has existed forever and will exist forever. Okay, so I get that he's beyond time. But God very quickly succumbs to the laws of reality in the Bible that we'll cover in future stories to come. If God has existed forever, that means that he spent eternity in darkness, in nothingness, before he decided, you know what, it's already been forever, but why don't I start creating the universe now? Why? What made him suddenly say, do you know what, I've been floating comfortably in this nothingness for literally ever, but I'm going to start doing stuff right now, because why not? And even though we've already covered that there's nothing, there's water. God is hovering over darkness and never-ending water. Where is this water? The water is a thing that exists. It's not like before anything was created there was just a bunch of water. Water didn't come into the picture until billions of years, billions and billions, like I think over 10 billion years before the universe was ever created. There was never a moment where the universe, or even Earth, was entirely water. There was a time where the Earth was entirely lava, but not entirely water. And what hell is, God just sends us to the beginning of Earth in a time loop. Okay, whatever, let's move on, we're never going to get through this. Then God spoke, "Let there be light," he said, and suddenly there was brightness all around. Another problem. Sorry, when we're just starting, there's a lot of issues because we have to get into the nature of this itself. First of all, who is God talking to? Why does God have to say, "Let there be light"? You know, I'm running out of battery already? What is that, 56 minutes of battery? No, I'm at 34. Maybe I was at 54 last time. I don't know. I'm not a professional videographer yet. I don't claim to be. But anyway, what I was saying, for frick's sake, okay. Why does God have to say, "Let there be light"? First of all, this is the beginning of the universe and existence itself, and yet God has... First off, God has a language. Maybe this is what God was doing for eternity before he decided to create the universe. Maybe he was turning his thoughts into words. But again, like, God supposedly had no beginning. God existed forever before the universe was created. God had all the time ever to come up with infinite languages before he finally thought, you know what, let's create a universe. I will speak out loud and see what happens. But God doesn't act surprised when there's light. There's just no telling what God's beginning was. And I know that Christians say God has no beginning, but it's only natural for us humans in this universe to question what the beginning of stuff was. We exist in a time, well, in a reality where time seems to always be moving forward. There's the illusion of memory and all that, you know, the idea that all points in time are happening at the same time, and it's only the fact that we have different memories along the time stream that creates the illusion that time's always moving forward. But nevertheless, it feels like time is moving forward. For example, I can look at my video camera right now. I can look at these books around me, and I see that they are still existing, and they continue to exist moment after moment. So I can imagine the possibility of them never having an end. But I can't imagine them never having a beginning. If we existed in a reality where time moved backwards, maybe we'd be able to conceive of things that never had a beginning, but we wouldn't be able to understand them never having an end. So if God's going to send me to hell because I had trouble believing in him, because he just doesn't fit with my understanding of the universe, why would he do that? Why would he blame me for trying my best to understand him with the understanding that I have and just not being able to do it? I'm just supposed to accept and have faith that he's just beyond my understanding? You can do that with anything. You have to have a reason to think that way. You don't have to, but I feel I have to, and a lot of other atheists do as well. But yeah, basically I'm just wondering, like, what's the point of God speaking out loud? People have told me this, you know, Christians have told me, like, God can bring things into existence just by speaking. Another way of looking at that would be, is God incapable of doing anything unless if he speaks it into existence? If we strapped him to a chair and put duct tape over his mouth, would he suddenly be powerless? Nevertheless, I guess God has a voice box. But also, what is happening with this light? If light is the only thing in existence right now, it's the first thing that God brings into existence, what is it lighting up? Does the vast emptiness of space turn from black to white? Or is it completely colorless and non-existent, and then it becomes black when light comes in? Or is God just able to see his own body as if he wasn't able to before when he's omnipotent? Did God even have eyeballs? Because there's literally no reason for eyes to exist without light. Eyes, like, I used to think that eyes were like a different material. As a little kid, I even thought that eyes could act as bouncy balls, until I was told that they're just flesh like anything else. Does the pupil even exist, or is it just a hole? Sorry, this is weird. I guess the light is just showing the water, I guess. yes. Like, what? Is water filling the whole universe, or is there, like, a surface to this water? Is the universe, like, above, and the water's, like, below, and the water divides it in half? Divides the infinite universe in half? God thought that the light was good. It's interesting that they say God thought the light was good, rather than the Bible, which says God saw that it was good. Which brings into question, again, frickin' morality. You know, there's a common dilemma online. What's it called again? Euthyphro's Dilemma, EUTHYPHRO''S dilemma. The question of, why does God say that things are good and bad? Does he say it because they're good and bad? Or is it entirely the fact that things are only good or bad because God says they are? Many Christians say that things are only good or bad because God says they are, and that if you don't have God or some other authority to turn to, then how can you possibly know what's good or bad? But if literally the only reason that things are good or bad is because God says they are, then that means that God is literally picking at random. He's literally throwing darts at a board or flipping a coin each time. Because if there's any noticeable pattern, if there's any particular reason that God is saying these are the good things and these are the bad, if there's any reason that God is separating things into piles of good or bad, that isn't him picking entirely at random, then it means that there is some form of morality that exists beyond God, that even God himself is choosing to follow. That being said, God is apparently just looking at the light and thinking, oh yeah, it's good, or seeing that it's good, which seems to imply that there is a level of morality, there is something that defines what good is, that exists even without God, and God himself is forced to succumb to. If God thought it was bad, would that suddenly make the light bad? There's no other being in existence except for God. There's nothing else to experience pain or pleasure. So there's nothing really moral or immoral about this light. Has God even thought about making living beings yet? He knows everything, but he doesn't act like it. And he separated it from the darkness. That isn't something that you have to do. You don't have to separate light from darkness. Light is already separate from darkness. Darkness is just the absence of light, or you could say light is the absence of darkness. That's just automatically a thing. That's how reality works. Or is this God creating reality? What's the reality like where light isn't already separate from darkness? He called the light day and the dark night. What? Has Earth even been created yet? We just have the universe. There's no day or night to experience if you're not on a planet orbiting around a star. It's not like light comes on or off if you're not on a planet. It's not like the sun turns off at night. God looked on as evening drew in and watched as morning arrived. So God is on some form of planet. And the sun or some other source of light is moving around, creating morning or evening. Maybe this is what I'm talking about. Maybe this is just how reality was before it turned into reality of today. But again, this is clearly a reality that I can't comprehend, at least. So why is God blaming me for trying my best to make sense out of this reality and just not being able to do it? He had formed the first day. Okay. Many Christians will say that a day could simply be symbolic of simply a 24-hour period, or it could be simply anything, and God just decides for himself when day one ends, since the sun doesn't exist yet. The sun isn't created until day 4. So what the frick? So isn't this day infinity because God has existed forever? On the second day, God said, "Let there be skies to divide the watery wastes. Some waters will float above the skies, and some will lie below." It all happened just so, and God called the skies heaven. What? So the water already exists, I get that for some reason, but skies don't separate water. Land separates water, and certainly not above and below. And why is he calling the skies heaven? He clearly changes his mind about that later, because we don't see the skies as heaven. This sounds almost like it was written by someone who didn't understand where rain came from. Next God said, "Let all the waters under heaven be gathered into one place, so that dry land may appear." Okay, now he's creating land. "I named the waters sea, and the dry land earth." Who cares? Why are you giving them names? They already have names. They're called water and land. Why are you calling them earth and sea? You're God. You're the only being in existence. There's no one else to understand or hear you about what you're giving these names to. Why are you giving synonyms to things already? Like, you just barely started creating stuff. God looked at his work and was pleased. Why wouldn't he be pleased? He commanded things to grow, and at once tiny green shoots began to sprout all over the earth. He just says, things grow, and then tiny little green things come out. Is that what God expected? Saying things grow could mean anything. He could have just made the universe grow, the infinite universe grow. He could have made the land and water grow. The earth is already created, I take it, but it's not saying that the earth is a ball. It sounds like the land and water just stretches out forever, or at least in our line of sight. But if God's omnipresent, then he can see everything already. He's omnipresent, but he can't see everything? That doesn't really make him sound very omnipotent. As plants of all kinds took root, leafy tendrils uncurled and stretched, stems burst into bushes, and trees sprang upwards. Then evening came once again, and morning making the third day. I don't really get why, like, these things are happening on these different days. Like, on the first day, God created light. He didn't have to put any work into that. He just said, let there be light, and the light existed. And then he separated light, darkness. Like, is half the universe white and the other black? Or is half the universe black and the other's just colorless and non-existent? So this is the non-existing universe, and this is the existing universe. But then on day 3, he's creating, like, all these plants and stuff. But again, all that he had to say is let things grow, and, like, things are... Is God not questioning this? Is God not saying, like, that's interesting, so when I say things grow, this is what happens? But supposedly an omnipotent and omniscient God would already know what was happening, but why would he have to say things grow? Why doesn't he have to be specific and just say things sprout up over him? You know, Christians might say, oh, well, you know, God's all-powerful. He doesn't need to be specific about how the plants have to grow. He can just command them to grow, and then they do. So they're already following a reality, and if God doesn't have to speak, why is he speaking? For fun, just to exercise his voice box, because he knows he's going to be using it a lot in the days to come, and then not really using it at all after that. Let there be lights in the skies to shine on the earth, said God. They will mark out the passing days, months, seasons, and years. He made the burning sun to rule over the day, and the cooler moon to govern over the night, together with the stars. So the sun, the moon, and the stars, the moon doesn't make light, the moon reflects light, but the sun and the stars didn't exist already. So where the frick was this light thing coming from? Now we have a sun, which makes sense for a day to exist, but the sun didn't exist before, so how did days and nights and mornings and evenings happen in the first 3 days? Was it just some ball of light just coming by like this? That sounds like the sun. Then he set them all moving in the heavens. God was again happy with what he had done, and the 4th day came to an end. The sun doesn't move. Well, I mean, it moves in the universe, but it doesn't move around the earth. And neither do the stars. Most of the stars are, like, not even close to the Earth. If the stars were sentient, they probably wouldn't even be aware that the Earth existed, let alone care about it. Let living creatures swim in the seas and birds fly through the skies, said God on the 5th day, which is kind of the first day if the sun just existed yesterday, or the 2nd day, but not the 5th day. Instantly, coral covered the sea beds, crabs burrowed into sand, and limpets clung to rocks. Shoals of fish darted through rivers and beneath waves, and sea monsters lurked in the deep. Above the earth, flocks of birds spread their wings for the first time and began to flap and flutter, soar and swoop, and God thought it was all good work. So now he's got living beings. Now we can actually question God's morality with things. He blessed every single creature and told them to fill the waters and the skies he had given them for their homes. He told them. So he has some sort of way to communicate with these animals. But so far he's been talking in English, or has he just been speaking in some unknown language beyond our comprehension? Could have specified that, or maybe it's expecting us to not know this because we're just starting. You could just say God was speaking in a language beyond what we can understand, because most of what God does is beyond our understanding anyway. Why does God have to get animals to recreate themselves? Like, he can just do that himself. Didn't he literally just do that? And also, what does it mean to be blessed? That is a question that I've been wondering for a long time. You know, people will say, like, you are blessed, or this day is blessed, or this is blessed, and I'm just wondering, what does that mean? We say bless you whenever someone sneezes. The funniest thing is that ever since I was a kid, I thought it was bless you. SH at the end. I didn't realize it was bless you, which is, we apparently say bless you because people used to think that when you sneeze, it's the risk of your soul coming out or something. I still just say bless you. Just makes things less creepy in my opinion. But when you bless something, it just sounds like you're saying it's good, or you're giving it good luck, essentially. But there are tons of instances of people being blessed in this story in the Bible, and then not much good happening and plenty of bad happening. But there is examples of people being cursed as well. Whenever we get to frickin' Noah, he curses somebody and then we never find out what the heck happens to him. We're not talking about Noah, that's a little bit of ways. On the 6th day, God said, "Now for the living creatures of the earth, from tiny creeping things to the largest wild beasts. He made creatures with fur, scales, and hair, beasts that grunted, growled, and snorted, animals with claws, paws, hooves, and tails, living things that galloped and slithered." So now he's creating the beings of the land. Why didn't he do that before? He was like, water and air now, and now the land. The land's the most complicated part. But the land is what I'll save for last on its own personal day. God made animals of every kind, and of every kind, as opposed to not every kind. Whatever animals existed at this time would be considered every kind. Or I guess it's saying every kind compared to what we still have. As if God is just going to suddenly create a new species. Maybe when we discover new species of things, it's because God brought them into existence like last week or something. And sent them out to live in the land that he had made, as opposed to the land that he didn't make. He watched them and thought he had done well. There's all these things about God thinking that he did well. Just looking and saying, okay, this is good. Supposedly a perfect God would be incapable of doing bad, and he's an omniscient God who would already know that he thinks it's good, and he would think it's good. What would God have to do that would make him go, do you know what? That's not so great. I'm sure you could list a bunch of stuff right now and say, well, if God did a crap job, he wouldn't look at it as good. Well, that's going to be brought into question as we get into later stories. God does a lot of sketchy stuff in the Bible, I'll tell you that much. And he allows a lot of sketchy stuff as well. And he disallows a lot of stuff that's fine. 1 minute of room, 12 minutes of battery. I'm going to maybe edit what I have so far for now. Gotta be honest, I'm worried about this Bible. Like, look, it kind of looks like it's already falling apart. I've only had it for like a month. Like, maybe the keys, I keep it in my bag a lot, but it's not like neatly there. My bag doesn't really have a spot like that, so I just kind of throw it in there. Maybe like the keys scrape upon it. Like this one I got very recently, and it's like the same thing, but it's different, I swear. Still got the receipt on it. But look, see? It's like, it looks brand new, but I guess the fact that this looks used is proof that I'm using it. Anyway, it's been a few days. Something that was pointed out to me in these last few days was photosynthesis. Plants were made before the sun in this story, but plants require the sun to stay alive. Maybe God crafted the plants and then realized, oopsie doopsie, I made an error. They require a thing, so I'm going to create the thing now. Maybe God originally designed them so that they didn't need the sun, but then why would he suddenly change it so that they do need the sun? Maybe the plants were getting the energy from that ball of light that must have existed before the sun, before God said, do you know what? I'm going to make something exactly like this, but like a giant fireball of death, and I'm going to call it the sun. I wonder what was going through God's head that he said, you know what, let's call a giant fireball an understatement. Let's make the sun like not a million, like 100 times bigger than the earth. How big is the sun? How big is the sun compared to the earth?
109 times.
Oh, wow. I was pretty close. If I said 110 times, that would have pretty much been as close as I could get, pick an odd number. But anyway, now he's creating animals, so, he weakened the plants so that they depend on sun. And now he's thinking, you know what, I'm an benevolent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent being, but I'm going to go ahead and create a bunch of beings with tiny little bodies that are vulnerable and can get hurt, theoretically, and I'm pretty much just going to set them up to experience pain in one way or another, That's clearly what we would do, right? I find it so strange when people are like, oh, God doesn't make us to be as powerful as him because we would probably misuse that power. And one of them literally goes ahead and says, humans with that kind of power might make lesser beings and then just submit them to torture. Yeah, that would be a very cruel thing for someone of that power level to do, wouldn't it? Where were we? On the sixth day, God said, now for the living creatures of the earth, from tiny creeping things to the largest wild beasts. He made creatures with fur, scales, and hair, beasts that grunted, growled, and snorted, animals with claws, paws, hooves, and tails, living things that galloped and slithered. Slithered. Wait, how many animals are there that slither? Because slither, the first thing that comes to mind is a snake. Then I'm thinking, maybe you got things like a snail. There's probably animals out there that I'm not aware of, or maybe haven't even just been discovered yet. But slithered is almost solely associated to snakes. But in the Garden of Eden story that we'll get to later, God punishes snakes by forcing them to be on their belly, which implies that they had some form of legs before. So what's slithering here? Just so that we're clear, all of these questions are technically, questions that I'm genuinely asking. God made animals of every kind and sent them out to live in the land that he had made. He watched them and thought he had done well. Last of all, God made people. This is why people think that people are special, because God made them last, and he made them in his own image. Men and women that looked just like him. The Bible actually says that they were created in his image, which could mean anything, but it can't be his physical image, because if God is omnipresent, it's not like God would have a body. It's not like God would have forward-facing eyes and wouldn't be able to see behind him. Emotionally, we can't be in his image, because God couldn't experience things like anger or guilt or any negative emotion, because those are associated with screwing up somehow or having things not go their way, which an omniscient, omnipotent God wouldn't have to worry about. You shall rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and the animals of the land, he told them. You own the earth, he said, and he blessed them. Why is he doing this? Like, I'm trying to imagine, a human doing this. A human creates his own world, purposely makes living beings that are so much more vulnerable than they need to be, and then creating arguably the most vulnerable species last, but making them look like humans, and then saying, you are going to have complete rule over all of these other guys that I made first. Youngest children always get the best treatment. Again, he's blessing humans, okay? That blessing doesn't really come in handy when we get to the Garden of Eden. I still don't get what blessing means. He already said you own the earth. What else is there to bless them with? Plus, it's saying very clearly here that he created humans, men and women, which implies that he's creating multiple men and multiple women, which is not how things go in the story that immediately follows, because God creates just one guy, and then later he creates one woman, and then descendants spring out from there. Go and fill the whole world. I am giving the plants to you and all the living creatures for food. That's cruel, dude. He's saying, yeah, you know what? I'm an omnipotent God that doesn't need to eat anything. Probably didn't even, have anything to eat. The concept of eating is being created just for these animals. He's creating all these vulnerable animals and saying, do you know what? I'm gonna make it so that they're not able to survive unless if they brutally consume another living thing, whether that's a plant or an animal. And you know what? Humans, the youngest kid who I just created last, you can go and eat whatever you want. You're clearly way more vulnerable than any other animal that I created, but go ahead, I've blessed you so that you're able to take down the harshest tigers, the biggest elephants, and the fastest hummingbirds. People don't really eat hummingbirds, do they? I just said hummingbird because there's a picture of a hummingbird there. As the sixth day drew to a close, God looked all around at everything he had done, and he was very pleased. When isn't he? The heavens and the earth were finished. Yeah, he already created heavens in the first verse, and then he goes and creates heaven again when he created the sky on the second day. It doesn't make any sense. He created heavens first, and then he just created the singular heaven. The heavens and the earth were finished, and everything had happened just as he had wished. Yeah, he's God. It would of course happen the way that he wished. All he has to do is speak and then things happen. He doesn't even have to be specific about what he wants to happen. Reality kind of has a mind of its own, it seems. I guess that's what we call God. This is all so confusing. The seventh day came and God was tired. He rested and blessed the seventh day of the week as a holy time of rest for all people. Just wait until we get to the Ten Commandments and you're told that if you dare to work on the seventh day, then you deserve to die. Apparently. He blessed the seventh day. How? And I find that people can't even agree on what the Sabbath, the seventh day of rest even is. Seventh day of the week, the day of rest. You know, most people say it's Sunday, some people say it's Saturday, some people say it's Friday. You got these little notes at the bottom, what did they say? The stars. God created the stars along with the sun and the moon to mark out the passing days. People have since learned how to tell time from the sun and mark the seasons by the movement of the stars. In the Bible, the word star is used to describe any light in the sky other than the sun and the moon. Why is the sun and moon so special? Why did he create, like, a giant fireballs, even bigger and more powerful than the sun, like, way over there, so that they only appear as tiny dots in the sky? Wouldn't it just be much more convenient to just create tiny dots in the sky and have them just be tiny dots in the sky? Because otherwise humans are eventually going to, thousands of years later, create spaceships and then see, oh, these things that we thought were tiny dots are actually these big balls of gas. That doesn't really make much sense in this holy book we've been following. What is a day? In the Bible, the word day can mean a period of 24 hours or an indefinite period of time. In the creation story, everything happens in 6 days. Some people think this is using day in its sense of period of time. Others believe it is just a way of expressing God's creative energy. Finally, others believe that creation took place in literally 6 days. What? Why are you using the word day then, if it's not a day? The animals. When God had made the land and the sea, he made the animals which lived there. The only animals named in this story are whales. I guess that's in the actual Bible. Otherwise, animals are listed in very general terms. From the air come birds, from the water all the fish and animals of the seas, and from the land come cattle, beasts, and creeping things. The Bible has a habit of saying creeping things a lot. I don't know what that means. Like, bugs? Just say bugs. These descriptions are supposed to cover all animals, from the tiniest to the most enormous, from ants to elephants. Are elephants the biggest animals in the world? Are there any animals bigger than elephants?
According to One Kind Planet, blue whale. The blue whale is the largest animal of all time.
Are there any animals smaller than ants? It's like bacteria.
According to Ask Dr. Universe, Washington State University, in fact, fairy flies are nearly 400 times smaller than the typical ant. And they are about 2 or 3...
I got this little section about the story. The creation story tells of how the world began. In simple language, it describes the wonder of the universe and God's power in creating it. There is a great deal of repetition of key phrases which mirrors the orderly way in which God created the world. The creation story can only be understood by believing in God. Okay, wait, sorry. The creation story can only be understood by believing in God, not by science. I love how that's literally saying, if this story isn't making sense to you, it's because you don't believe in God. First of all, you have to believe in God, you know, and then you'll understand the story. And if you do believe in God and the story still doesn't make sense, then it means you haven't truly believed in God. You have to first believe that this story makes sense, and then the story will make sense, we swear. The world was created by God and depends on Him for its continued existence. Then why does the universe look so clockwork? You know, like, things are orbiting each other, like the moon's orbiting planets, planets are orbiting the sun. It seems like they're going to do that whether God's there or not. Is God literally always pushing them along the way? Is that what God's busy doing all the time? Why would He do that? Why wouldn't He just set things in motion so that they can go by themselves? Oh, He did? Oh, okay, then I guess the universe isn't really dependent on Him for its continued existence. People say that humans are arrogant to say that God didn't create them when, like, isn't it arrogant to say that God created humans to be just like Him and blessed them and made them different from all the other animals? It's pretty arrogant of God to create something that just apparently ceases to exist if God doesn't exist. Like, we humans, we create stuff like this bouncy ball, but it's not like if we all suddenly disappear. Like, There are tons of YouTube videos dedicated to that, talking about what if every single human suddenly disappeared. Like, it's not like... I'm just going to show you because I like it. This crayon piggy bank is going to suddenly disappear. It's going to take like 100 million years for the last plastic bottles to disappear. Is my hair... Oh my god, this hair's always like that. Okay, whatever. That's the creation story according to the Children's Bible. Next time we'll be looking at the Garden of Eden story. We still won't be talking about original sin yet. That's the next one. But we'll talk about the Garden of Eden, which is basically the story that we just read, but told differently in a different order. Now that we read that, let's go ahead and read the actual Bible and see what the heck it says. The first book of Moses, called Genesis. If you're interested in kind of the author and the time period. See, I said thousands of years because it says that it's 4,000 years ago. Or no, 6,000 years ago because it's 4,000 BC. Open up your Bibles and let's read along, shall we? Oh, it's divided into sections. This one is the history of creation. Okay, Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. To say that the earth was without form and void sounds like nothing. Like literally, it sounds like God created nothing. And darkness was on the face of the deep. I hear people say that that's like, oh, see, the universe was so dark until God created the light. Like, okay, that's a way to take a literal thing very metaphorically. It's not like the darkness of the universe meant anything when God was the only one around to experience it. If he didn't like it, he could have just created light whenever he wanted. Why did he wait for eternity, supposedly? God exists beyond time. You can't take it seriously. You can't take it literally. You can't take it in a way that makes sense. Okay, then why is God punishing me for not being able to make sense of it? And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Thus God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. I first read this on an online Bible. I remember, like, me and my grandparents were just kind of reading it just to see, like, okay, what's the Bible up about? It didn't say the firmament was called heaven, it said the firmament was called sky, which makes more sense because he already created heavens in the first verse. Even if we were to say that he's just creating another heaven for some reason, like, why would he have to call it heaven? It's like he already has these things called heavens, and he's like, okay, this firmament that I made, let's just call it heaven too, you know, why not? Not like there's any living beings around to question me about it. So the evening and the morning were the second day. Then God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." The water isn't gathered into one place. I mean, like, technically all the oceans are connected in some way or another, but, like, it's not like the water's gathered into one place. Like, the dry land, like, what? Did these guys write this, like, not knowing, like, are they trying to talk about the ocean? Like, surely even when this book was being written, there were, like, things like puddles and lakes. Water isn't gathered into one place, I don't get that. And let dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and gathered together of the waters he called seas. Well, he's renaming things, I don't get it. And God saw that it was good. It does sound like it's saying that, like, there is some sort of universal standard that's beyond God on what is good and bad, because God is seeing that it's good. Because if God is literally not picking things at random, that means that he does have some sort of pattern that he's following, unless he just made that pattern up. But even if it is just whatever God says is good, and whatever he says is bad, then why did he bother saying anything was bad? Why didn't he just say everything was good so that no one would have to experience pain? Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." Like, the way God is being specific in this version of the story, he's not just saying things grow, he's describing what's happening, but, like, the word tree and seed and all these words technically, like, what, like, did they even have meaning? Like, God spent eternity before the universe trying to imagine things like trees. Why didn't he just create them then? He could have just created a tree. He could have created a piece of paper from a tree and drawn a tree on it. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the third day. Then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, as if they weren't already divided already. And let them be for signs and seasons. What does he mean, signs? Like, is he talking about, like, when solar eclipses happen and people from ancient times might have thought that it was a message from the god or something? I almost said gods, but technically Christianity only follows one god, so it kind of works here. And let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years. Screw the nights and months and weeks. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. Then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. I like how he just said that he created the stars, as if it's like some sort of afterthought, when the stars are literally like way bigger and way more complicated than just the sun and the moon. And what about the other moons? Like the ones that orbit other planets. What about the other planets? God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, which he already did when he created light in the first place. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day, which is not the first day, because there's finally a sun. Then God said, let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them. So he blessed all the creatures, okay. Saying, be fruitful and multiply. What does it mean to be fruitful? Like to be good? And fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. What if he said, be vegetable-ful? Be veggie-ful. Veggie-tales. I should make a show about that. I could get a human to create a show about that, and he'll thank me for giving him the idea somehow. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth. Like, he bothers to say the word beast. Like, every instance that I heard the word beast that isn't from the Bible has always been like some sort of like kind of lame attempt to mean a scary thing. So God's like, let's create some scary stuff. And God saw that it was good. I mean, scary stuff is sometimes fun, like haunted houses and roller coasters. When it's in a safe environment, you get to experience the fear with that, with knowing that you're fine. Like, beasts are more than just haunted houses and roller coasters. Beasts are actually very dangerous if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make a man in our image. I don't get why he says us in our image. There's only one God, supposedly, right? It seems like he's talking to his angels, but it was never specified that he created angels. And why is he saying, let us make man in our own image? Like he's asking for permission from somebody. According to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea. Like, the humans don't have dominion over the fish of the sea, though. The sea is very big, and there are tons of fish that go their whole lives without ever knowing that anything close to the surface of the water even exists. I guess humans do fish a lot, though, but they didn't do that until way later when they created boats and giant nets and... ah, jeez. Why did God create humans? Over the birds of the air and over the cattle overall. We don't have dominions over the birds. We can't fly. The best we can do is shoot them. Over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Oh man, the creeping things are definitely gonna multiply with mosquitoes and stuff. Why do mosquitoes exist again? Like, do they actually like, I'm not meaning to insult mosquitoes, but like, it seems like all that they really do is go around and suck on other people's blood until they get swatted by a hand or something. Why didn't God just create them into a different species? I don't mean a more useful one, but just like, why did he create all these different species? Like, now there are people arguing over animal cruelty. Oh, but we have to eat some stuff to survive. Plants are living too. It's like, God, why do you have to make things so complicated like this? So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created him. Male and female, he created them. Those were some weird pronouns. Male and female. This is why so many people say, see, there are only two genders. Can we just calm down about, like, gender and stuff like that. Like, gender should not matter. I don't care if you identify as male or female or something else. Like, I'm gonna judge you for who you are, not your gender. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, See, I have given you every herb that yields seed which is on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed to you on the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on to you it shall be for food, also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth. Why did he create beasts if he's just going to create a far more inferior species that is still going to have dominion over the beasts somehow, and are just going to eat them? And everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life. What creeps on the earth that doesn't have life? Like leaves, I guess? And like rocks, maybe, when the wind blows? Leaves too, when the wind blows, but whatever. Animals can push leaves and rocks, whatever. Animals can push dirt or lumps of waste. I think I'm going insane. Thank goodness we're almost done. Then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. I love how he just created a world where there's a bunch of living things that can only survive by consuming other living things, and he's saying, yep, this is very good what I've done here. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. The seventh day gets mentioned at the start of chapter 2. Whatever. This video's an hour long, I can't believe it. And that was just the very first story of the Bible. I hope that everyone, was somewhat entertained by this video. Like, I hope that we all just kind of had a good laugh, essentially. I'm not meaning to, attack Christianity or anything like that. Like, if you're an atheist and you watch this and you just kind of had something to chuckle at, and Christians, if you watch this and your beliefs aren't swayed at all and you just kind of chuckled at this too for a different reason, then that's great, you know? This is a YouTube video. I'm just hoping to entertain people so that I can hit 1,000 subs and a certain number of watch times so that I can start making money again. My head hurts. I think I need to go take a nap. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you didn't, leave it a dislike. Comment down why, comment down your thoughts, comment down whatever you want. Just keep it appropriate, please. And subscribe so that you know when my next video comes out. Thanks again so much for watching, and as always, I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye! Atheists will say, we believe the universe was created. Christians will say... Atheists will say the universe was created by the Big Bang. Christians will say what caused the Big Bang? It must. If we existed in a reality where time moved backwards, maybe we'd be able to conceive of things that never have a beginning, but they would. Maybe we'd be able to conceive of things that had a beginning. Maybe we'd be able to conceive of things that never had a beginning, but we wouldn't be able to understand them never having an end. Some waters will float above the skies, and some will lie. Sorry, phone alarm. And some will lie below. He made creatures with fur, scales, and hair. If God is literally not picking things at random, that means that he does have some sort of pattern that he's following, unless he just made that pattern up. But even if it is just whatever God says is good and whatever he says is bad, then why did he bother saying anything was bad? Why didn't he just say everything was good so that no one would have to experience pain? And it was so. Then God said, let us make a man in our image. I don't get why he says us in our image.